Welcome to HD Rare Coins, your ultimate source for rare coins, fascinating history, and the thrill of discovery. From legendary pennies to hidden gems, we explore the world of numismatics one amazing coin at a time. In the early 1970s, America was a nation caught between two worlds. The echoes of the 60s still reverberated: civil rights marches, the moon landing, the pain of Vietnam, and yet something new was emerging. The disco era hadn't yet taken off, but the seeds of cultural transformation were everywhere. In this liminal space, the U.S. Mint found itself tasked with preserving tradition while keeping pace with change, and so, in 1972, the Kennedy half-dollar returned. It was the coin that had carried sorrow in its first days, created in the aftermath of an assassination that shocked the world. When it debuted in 1964, people didn't just collect it. They held it in reverence, as if clinging to a piece of a dream that had ended too soon. By 1972, much of that emotion had faded, but the Kennedy half still carried weight, not just in metal, but in memory. Most people didn't notice anything different. It still bore the same design: President John F. Kennedy's sharp, confident profile on the obverse, and the presidential seal on the reverse, crowned by the bold eagle. But under the surface, subtle shifts were taking place. The mint was under pressure to produce coins faster, cleaner, cheaper. Dies were used longer. Blanks were processed at increasing speeds. Mistakes happened. It wasn't until years later that collectors started noticing the small signs. A coin from the Denver Mint with a strange mark beneath the R in Liberty, a tiny raised notch that shouldn't be there. Another from Philadelphia with a faint doubling of Kennedy's eye, visible only under high magnification. And then, the coin that would change everything. It was found by accident. A man named Lou, sorting through bags of half-dollars in search of silver, found a 1972 coin that felt off. The color was different. Lighter. More radiant. He thought he'd found a silver coin in a clad year. But when he weighed it, the scale tipped at 11.50 grams, heavier than normal. He submitted it for testing, just in case. The result stunned him. It had been struck on a leftover 40% silver planchet, one that should have been phased out by 1971. Somehow, this rogue blank had been fed into the press and hit with 1972 dies. No one knows how many exist. But Lou's coin was the first to be certified. It sold at auction for $13,500. That discovery triggered a search. Coin roll hunters, collectors, and dealers began poring over 1972 half-dollars. Not just for silver planchets, but for anything unusual. And they found it. .1 coin, graded by NGC, bore the marks of a dramatic off-center strike. Nearly 40% of the design was missing, and yet the date remained clear. Another was a broad strike error, with the rim blown out to the edge like a melting clock, all details intact but stretched. These weren't just mistakes, they were art formed by accident. Each piece commanded thousands at auction, but the real turning point came when a sharp-eyed collector spotted something hidden in plain sight. There were not one, not two, but three distinct reverse designs used in 1972. Slight variations, minute changes in the feathering of the eagle's wings, the spacing of the stars, the positioning of United States of America. They weren't announced. They weren't documented. But they were real. Type 1 had a shallow design, soft details. Type 2, much rarer, showed crisp features but was only found on proofs, except one surfaced in circulation. That single coin sold for $29,000, sparking debates across forums, auctions, and YouTube channels alike. San Francisco had always been a quiet outpost in the mint's empire. It was where the proofs were born, coins struck with care, love, and intention. Their surfaces mirrored the precision of craftsmanship, their edges sharp, their details immaculate. In 1972, San Francisco produced proof sets for collectors, just like every other year. But one thing was different. A bag went missing, not just any bag, a sealed, inventory-tagged bag of Kennedy half-dollars meant for proof sets. The mint kept tight control over proof coins. They weren't supposed to escape into circulation. They weren't supposed to be mishandled. But sometime between production and packaging, an entire sealed lot vanished. No report. No announcement. No investigation made public. 2 decades later, one of those coins surfaced in an estate sale in Oregon. It wasn't in a proof set. It wasn't even in a holder. Just loose, riding in a glass ashtray among paper clips, a pin, and 3 wheat pennies. But the moment it was examined under light, everything changed. Mirror finish. Frosted devices. Perfect strike, yet the surfaces were slightly worn, as if it had passed through a few hands before being forgotten. That a proof coin, that had circulated. Impossible, they said, until PCGS confirmed it was a 1972 Kennedy half-dollar proof that had been removed from the mint before it was ever sealed in plastic. The coin wasn't damaged enough to be worthless. In fact, its luster held up, and the strike was flawless. It received a grade of PR 62 cameo, and went on to sell for $7,800, simply for the story it told. Collectors began whispering about how many more proof coins might have slipped out into the wild, unnoticed and unloved, but even as that mystery stirred debate, another shook the community from within. A coin dealer in Buffalo, New York, was inspecting a bulk purchase from a private collector when he came across a 1972 Kennedy half-dollar that looked different. At first glance, it was typical. But something about the lettering seemed off. He placed it under magnification, and there it was, clear doubling across Liberty, strong notching on the W, in We Trust, and most striking of all, Kennedy's I showed a second outline, as if the president was glancing into an alternate reality. That he had found a 1972 DDO, double die obverse. At the time, no such variety was catalogued. That he sent the coin to experts. The grading community debated it for weeks before coming to a consensus. This was not mechanical doubling. It was a genuine, significant double die, the kind of error that defined an entire year's minting. They named it the Buffalo Eye. Within days, YouTube videos popped up. Collectors dove into their collections. Coin forums buzzed with excitement. Dealers scanned their inventories. Yet none could match the strength of doubling seen on that coin. Its auction debut shattered expectations. $34,000. One of the highest prices ever paid for a clad Kennedy half-dollar error, but the Kennedy half series has always carried more than monetary value. It carries symbolism. It carries myth. And in the case of the 1972 issue, it carries secrets, like the coin that vanished from mint records only to reappear in a museum display, unlabeled, undocumented, but bearing the unmistakable signature of a die gouge between the eagle's talons. Experts believe it was a pattern test coin, created during a mint trial period to experiment with new die steel. Only one was ever found. And when traced, it was discovered sitting in the personal collection of a mint engraver who had passed away in 1994. The coin was never meant to be released. Its edges were still sharp. It bore no mint mark. And its reverse featured microscopic ridges invisible to the naked eye, a detail added to test die fatigue under pressure. It's now housed under glass in a Nevada collector's private gallery. Its value, well over $110,000, but it has never been offered for sale. It's not always the rarest strike or the most obvious error that fetches headlines. Sometimes, it's the story, the journey of the coin, the people it touches, the moments it passes through. The 1972 Kennedy half-dollar is more than a coin. It's a timestamp on a nation caught between memories of a president lost too soon and a future rushing in with change. The year was 1974. The country was reeling from scandal. The name, Watergate, echoed through every household like a whispered betrayal. President Nixon's grip on the nation was slipping, and trust in American institutions was fractured. Inflation crept up, gas lines stretched for blocks, and people questioned where the future was heading. But amid all the noise, the U.S. Mint kept striking metal like clockwork, steady, mechanical, unwavering. Coins didn't pause for politics. They just circulated. In the spring of that year, deep inside the Denver and Philadelphia mint facilities, presses thundered with rhythm, feeding strip after strip of clad metal into enormous machines, and out came the familiar shine of Kennedy half-dollars. They looked just like the year before, same design, same composition, same profile of the fallen president whose legacy had been etched into American pockets for a decade. But the truth was, nothing about 1974 was ordinary, not even the coins. It started quietly. A dealer in Illinois found one. A 1974 D. Kennedy half-dollar with a reverse that looked different. He couldn't explain it, but the eagle felt stronger. Crisper. As if the coin had been struck with more force or on a fresh die. He tucked it away, just in case. A year later, another surfaced. This one from Texas. Identical date. Same Denver mint mark. But the fields were unusually smooth. It had a mirrored sheen, not proof, but far more lustrous than any business strike should have been. Still, it didn't make headlines, not until the summer of 1975. That's when a small numismatic magazine published a letter from a collector claiming to have found something unthinkable, a 1974 D. Kennedy half-dollar struck on a 90% silver planchet. At first, no one believed it. Silver had been phased out from the half-dollar composition by 1971. By 1974, the alloy was strictly copper-nickel clad, but the weight didn't lie. The coin tipped the scale at 11.50 grams, far more than its clad counterpart. And metallurgical testing confirmed the impossible. It was silver. Theories flooded in. Some believed it was a leftover blank from the San Francisco proof program. Others suspected a rogue planchet from a foreign contract. But one thing was clear, it was real, and it was priceless. Only a handful of these 1974 D silver errors are known to exist today. One example, graded MS-63 by PCGS, sold privately in 2016 for a staggering $58,000. Another, in even better condition, changed hands through Heritage Auctions for $85,700, setting a new standard for modern coin errors. But silver wasn't the only mystery wrapped in the folds of 1974. In Philadelphia, another anomaly emerged. This one wasn't about metal, but about design. A 1974 Kennedy half-dollar with missing initials. The designer's initials, FG, standing for Frank Gasparo, had been inexplicably left off the reverse, beneath the eagle's tail feathers. In some cases, it was worn. In others, it was never there at all. Collectors argued fiercely, was it a die polishing error, or was there a more mysterious cause? The community now knows it as the no FG variety. It is incredibly rare, especially in higher grades, and has become a white whale for Kennedy half collectors. Even circulated examples can fetch hundreds of dollars, while mint state, no FG, coins push well into the thousands, with one MS-66 example selling for $10,000 in 2021. And just when it seemed 1974 had offered all its secrets, another one emerged. A coin with two obverse, discovered in Ohio at a flea market in 1994. The piece at first appeared like a normal Kennedy half. But when flipped over, instead of the eagle reverse, it bore another Kennedy portrait, slightly rotated, with mirrored fields. It had been created by mistake, a true mule error, where two obverse dies were mistakenly paired. There's only one known example. The error was confirmed by multiple grading services. And its estimated value, more than $140,000, making it one of the most valuable mint errors ever discovered in the Kennedy series. The year was 1985. Ronald Reagan sat in the White House. The Cold War still lingered like a cold wind over the world's shoulders. MTV ruled the airwaves. The Space Shuttle Discovery made headlines, while the average American household was settling into a rhythm of VHS tapes, microwave dinners, and late-night reruns. It was a strange, electric time, both nostalgic and uncertain, and in the steady hum of the U.S. Mint, another round of Kennedy half-dollars quietly rolled off the presses. Most Americans barely noticed them anymore. Once beloved, the 50-cent coin had drifted from daily use. Vending machines didn't accept them. Stores rarely gave them as change. Yet, the Mint kept producing them. Each one bore the same design that first appeared in 1964, John F. Kennedy's profile on the obverse, symbolizing hope, strength, and a legacy cut short. The presidential seal still spread its wings across the reverse, a constant reminder of duty and heritage, but something about the 1985 issue was different. Not on the surface, on paper, it was the same coin. Struck in copper-nickel clad, issued by both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, with no proof coins produced for circulation. But under the surface, in the layers of metal and memory, subtle anomalies began to emerge. It began with a phone call. A coin shop owner in Tucson received a call from an elderly woman who'd saved a jar of $50 for years. She was cleaning out her home and wanted to sell them. When he emptied the jar onto his desk, they clinked and spun like any others, until one caught his eye. It was a 1985 D. Kennedy $50. But it looked wrong. Its luster was blinding, far brighter than any clad coin he'd seen from that year. He weighed it. Normal. He examined it. The detail was sharper, almost proof-like, but this wasn't a proof strike. It had come from a roll. And then he noticed it, a doubling on Kennedy's ear, clear as day. He submitted the coin to PCGS. The results changed everything. It was certified as a genuine 1985 D double die obverse, with sharply defined notching on the letters of Liberty and a distinct doubled profile on Kennedy's eye and ear. It was one of the first of its kind ever discovered from that year. And soon, other collectors found more. Not many, but enough to confirm that a small run of error coins had slipped through the Denver Mint's quality control. The best example later sold for $6,750, an eye-popping figure for a coin that most people never gave a second glance, but that was just the beginning. In the quiet town of Allentown, Pennsylvania, a dusty bank vault had remained sealed for over 30 years. Its key had been lost, its contents long forgotten by the family who once leased it. It wasn't until 2018, after a court-ordered inventory, that the door finally creaked open. Inside was a single velvet pouch and a yellowing envelope labeled, 1985 halves, do not open. The bank staff handed it to the estate executor, who opened the pouch with trembling fingers. Inside was a full Federal Reserve roll of Kennedy $50, 20 coins, crisp and uncirculated. They were blinding in their luster, untouched by time. At first glance, they appeared typical. But when a collector later examined the roll under light, one coin stood out like a flare in the fog. It bore the date 1985. It showed Kennedy's profile, but the reverse was gone. Instead of the proud eagle and shield, there was an eerie impression, mirrored, reversed, and incomplete. The detail had been pressed inward, the design of the obverse punched fully onto the reverse surface like a ghost. This was a full blockage error, caused when one coin fails to eject from the press and the next planchet is struck against it, producing a one-of-a-kind mirror image. Only one in hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, results in a perfect blockage. This one was flawless. It sold at a private auction in Chicago for $21,500, a staggering sum for a modern clad coin. Collectors were stunned. Could there be more? Some began hunting 1985 $50 again. Others pulled out old folders and rolls that had sat forgotten in drawers and shoeboxes. It didn't take long before another anomaly surfaced. A teenager in Miami, just beginning his numismatic journey, found a strange coin in a dealer's junk bin. It was heavily worn, the edges dulled by years of handling. But it felt different. When weighed, it came in lighter than expected. The surface color was off, more golden than silver. Further analysis revealed the shocking truth that it had been struck on a foreign planchet, specifically, a brass alloy blank intended for a coin minted overseas through a U.S. mint contract. Somehow, it had slipped into the $50 press line and received a full Kennedy half strike. It was the only known 1985 $50 struck on that particular planchet. NGC certified it and it later sold for $12,800 at a Florida coin convention, but not all surprises came from metal. Some came from absence. A sharp-eyed collector in Oregon noticed something strange when reviewing a batch of Philadelphia minted 1985 $50. One coin had no mint mark. At first, he assumed it was a worn example. But under magnification, the surface was untouched, smooth, clean, with no trace of a P. In 1985, Philadelphia coins were still struck without a mint mark as standard practice for the Kennedy half. That wouldn't change until 1987. So this coin should have been normal, but it wasn't. The font on the date was subtly different. The portrait had deeper lines in Kennedy's cheek and jaw. And the edge reading was less defined. It was, in fact, a die test coin, struck using a transitional die prepared for use with future mintmark changes but released early by accident. Only a few such examples have been confirmed. The most pristine known to collectors today sits in a museum collection and is insured $4.19000. And then came the oddest twist of all. A Kennedy $50 from 1985 found in Nevada appeared to be clad in gold. Of course, gold-plated novelty coins exist, sold through late-night television and gimmicky catalogs. But this one was different. It wasn't coated. It wasn't aftermarket. It had been struck on a gold-plated experimental planchet, a test piece believed to be used internally at the mint to experiment with alternative materials for future series. Somehow, it had escaped that it was authenticated, slabbed, and dubbed the 1985 Kennedy Gold Ghost. Its value was incalculable. It changed hands in a private collector's circle for $37,000, shrouded in mystery. The 1985 Kennedy $50 had become more than a forgotten coin in a fading series. It was now a portal. A key to the secrets of the mint.